and now it's 9.
Hai Kang Wening. Malam Mbak Nia, Pak Edwin.
Malam, Bu.
Wening, what time we should start? Like 1 minute, right?
Yes, 1 more minute.
Okay. So, hello, Miss Nia. How is Thread Hub going on?
I'm sorry. I'm talking to me.
How is Thread Hub going on in Bogor today, right?
I'm not in Bogor.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I'll explain where I am when I introduce myself. I guess.
Oh, nice. Hello, Mr. Edwin.
All right, so let's start. First of all, we would like to say thank you so much for all the speakers that despite of it is night in your country or it is 2 morning in your country, we would like to say thank you for coming, and we would like also to thanks to everyone for coming to our first day of the spring course. And in here we our event is like to celebrate the 13th of International Day of Forest. So the International Day of Forest is a celebration that we actually like coming from the FAO and IFSA as one of the biggest forestry students association who would like to join the effort on raising the awareness of forest importance. In this year, our theme is the forest and innovation. So in here in IFSA, we would like to show the contrast of the innovation that we have. For tonight, we will talk more about the carbon projection and the labor, and that's how we show the contrast itself. So before we start our event, we would like to make sure that everyone please ensure that you are on mute so to avoid the noise distractions, and we encourage you to switch on your camera if you have but if you have like any technical issue like the internet, that's totally fine to keep it off. And also the last is we encourage you to ask question in the Q&A round, or if you have like something in mind, you can also like write it in the chat box, so we will read it for the speakers afterwards, or when the Q&A session is come. So because like we already gather in here, and let's take a photo first. So for everyone, please switch on your camera. So for this, I would like to pass to Kak Afif. Thank you.
All right, Wening, thank you so much, everyone. Please open your camera so we are able to take a picture together. All right, then I saw that many people open the camera. So hold on. I'm going to count 3, 2, 1, right? All right. For the first slide, okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, the second slide. 3, 2, 1. Smile. All right. Well done, Wening.
All right, a minute. My screen is still loading. And wait, I guess you can say, okay. So our theme for today is the future of forest labor and the carbon neutrality projections in here we would, as we know that all the countries right now would like to achieve the carbon net zero. However, like we also like having such a discussion regarding like how the local communities would like to see, and how like yes, and how is also the consequence to our socio-economic, because if we want to achieve the net zero, so how is our industrialization, and when we want to shift to this, to that kind of world, what kind of thing that we should think. So in here there are some questions that we would like to ask. The first is, what is still missing in our carbon neutrality projection? As we know, like many of country like set the deadline in 2045 for achieving the net zero, and others like it varies among all the countries. And the second is the market of uncertainties, because like when we would like to trade, like somehow in some country, because the definition of forest is different on each country, so how can we try to engage smallholders or rural labor market? And the last is to what degree certification can help on the carbon neutrality projections. Before we move to the first presentations, we would like to read all the speakers' biography. Thanks. The first is we have Mr. Edwin Hartanto. He is currently the head of Carbon Trading Development Unit of Indonesia Stock Exchange. He was like having like he was like an economic undergraduate from the Indonesian University, taking in management and like minoring in finance. And he was also like a Master of Arts students in the University of Rotterdam, talking of economics of development. And we also have Mrs. Rulita. Mrs. Rulita is the General Secretary of Indonesian Forestry and Allied Workers Union. She has led efforts in the sustainable forestry for sustainable jobs campaign as part of her capacity development work with the Indonesian Forestry Trade Union and the Building and Wood Workers International since 1998, where she was entrusted with key roles in institutional capacity building, industrial and sectoral relations, policy advocacy and collective bargaining negotiation at national and Asia Pacific regional levels. So part of work has also been representing unions on active engagement in the multi-stakeholder sustainable development and forest certification agenda, such as the plantation forest certification standard of the Indonesian Eco-Labeling Institution, the union lead multi-stakeholder dialogues and the sustainable wood and forestry industry. And as she also like currently being part of the forest dialogue, and as one of the forest dialogue delegation in the UNFCCC COP 27, 2009, 2011 is Asia flag on illegal logging, Forest World Australia Asia Pacific Sustainable Forest Management Project, social audits on international frameworks and agreement of Faber-Castell, Stadler and IFBWW, the Standards Committee on the Indonesian Forestry Certification Cooperation, the ILO tripartite experts on sustainable development, decent work and green jobs in 2015, and UNFF major groups experts, workers, and trade unions. The experience in the multi-stakeholders arena described above complement with her academic studies in literature and sociology, law, master programs in public administration, and certified mediator, conciliator, and contract drafter have contributed her to leadership in the Forest Stewardship Council International Board of Directors, representing the Social Chamber South from 2014 to 2021, where she was appointed as the board chairperson in 2016 and 2018. That's so amazing to know. And also like our speaker, Mrs. Nia, she is the scientist at the G4 base in Indonesia, Ethiopia, and currently in Montpellier, France, hosted by CIRAT, Forest and Society Research Unit. Her works focus on forest, climate change, and livelihood interaction in tropical countries. So Mrs. Nia is very like her research is more into RADD plus project that we will also like talk more in here. So as she is a multidisciplinary scientist, she is skilled in designing, implementing, and conducting training on a wide range of survey methods. She obtained her PhD in Natural Resources Economics and master degree in economics from North Carolina State University. and double bachelor degree in environmental science and economic in Murdoch University, Western Australia. So that's all like our biography of speakers. As we mentioned in the email that the how to say the presentation will start from Mr. Edwin because Mrs. Nia have another agenda. So Mrs. Nia will present her presentation first, following by Mr. Edwin, following by Mrs. Rolita, and then Mr. Edwin. So for Mrs. Nia, we pass the microphone to you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I share my screen, please?
Sure. Let me stop. Okay.
Okay, can you see the screen well? Hello?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks for your flexibility in moving me first. I'm really sorry for the other speakers. Can you please tell me how many minutes I have for speaking, so I don't get out over time? I will
20
assume.
minutes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll talk for 15, and then after that, if people can ask me questions, that'll be great. Okay, so my name is Stipniati Atmaja. I'm a scientist at C4 ECRAF. It's international research institute that's focusing on forestry and agroforestry. We have our headquarters in Bogor and in Nairobi. But I am currently positioned in Montpellier in France, hosted by Center for Research on Agroforestry and Agriculture and Development in France. I was not really sure what to talk about today, but after discussing with Wenning, it seems like it would be nice to just introduce the role of forests in climate change mitigation and this whole idea of carbon neutrality and just like carbon credits, these kinds of ideas. So hopefully that will open the way for other speakers to discuss their work. So here I'm just going to focus on an introduction of REDD, RED initiatives. Since I don't know you, I'm just assuming that there's a few people that don't really know what this topic is about, and so I'll go through some definitions. The first is just to understand a bit about forest carbon in the context of climate change. So here I'm going to use the term forest carbon to talk about greenhouse gases that are sequestered, like sucked up, and stored in standing forests, including in peatlands. There are many types of greenhouse gases. We always hear about carbon dioxide, but actually that's just one out of many that we consider greenhouse gases, and a lot of the others are quite much more potent than carbon dioxide. So here, when we talk about carbon credits, things like that, we always look at this unit called tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, or TCO2 EQ. So it just basically translates all these different other types of greenhouse gases into one unit of carbon. So for example, 1 ton of methane, which is CH4, has 25 times more potency than 1 ton of carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. So then you make it an equivalent to carbon dioxide, so to say that everything is then the same unit. And so why is forest important for talking about climate change, especially in mitigating the effects of climate change? I think a lot of participants that are coming from Africa, for example, from Latin America and from Asia, we sort of see climate change as a problem that needs to be, that we need to adapt to. A lot of dry spells, a lot of sudden floods, strong and unpredictable weather. But here, forests can function as a way to adapt to that, but also to mitigate because it has the power to absorb these greenhouse gases and keep it in the forest instead of in the atmosphere. But also, the problem is that when we lose these forests and when these forests are degraded, then it also releases those greenhouse gases back into the atmosphere. So there's two ways of treating forests as part of the solution for mitigating climate change. One is to plant more forests and to just keep the forest standing, but also to avoid that there are as much deforestation happening. So here, there's a packet of ways that we can help mitigate climate change. It's called Natural Climate Solutions. And forest is just one of it, but you have also agriculture and grasslands that also can absorb and keep greenhouse gases in the soils and in the biomass. There's also wetlands. But here we're talking about forests, not only because we're forestry students, but also one study is saying that natural climate solutions can provide a large portion of cost-effective ways to mitigate, reduce CO2 from the atmosphere. But the forest is offering a large part of that natural climate solutions. So it can offer over 2/3 of this cost-effective way. So what I'm saying is that forestry is a very important part of our tool as humanity to counter climate change. So what does RED mean? RED is reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. This is a term that is being used before unofficially, but now it's quite official. UNFCCC is the United Nations Convention that's talking about climate change, is already adopting it officially as one of the strategies that countries can use to combat climate change. So the little plus is to say that we also want to conserve and sustainably manage forests and also to enhance forest carbon stock. It's not to just reduce emissions. What does it mean, reducing emissions from forests, from deforestation, forest degradation? One is to avoid the deforestation in the first place. So let's just say you have an area where you know that it's like forest deforestation is going to happen, and so a project can come in and say, look, you know what, instead of letting that other land use come in, we're going to prevent that by taking over this land, and we're just going to protect it. Another is to reduce deforestation. This is going to say something like, all right, normally when this project isn't here, people will come in and they will deforest at a certain rate, let's say 2% per year. Our project will work with them so that they deforest only 1% per year. So it's a reduction. It's not completely avoiding. Another is to conserve existing forests, which means that this is a forest that's already good, it's already standing, and let's just keep it that way. So zero deforestation. Another is to establish, restore forests. So there is no forest here, maybe there was never a forest, but we're going to plant something here, or we're going to restore it to the condition that it was before. Another is timber plantations or forest plantations to manage it better in a more sustainable way, maybe to ensure that instead of maximizing profits from timber, you're maximizing its carbon sequestration potential. So that could include improving or changing some techniques or extending the harvest cycles. But so how do people do this? There's two major approaches. One is at the project level, and another one is at the jurisdiction level. So one is project, one is program. The terminology is simply like that. So the project one is a bit like limited area, and it's limited to more, it's based on land ownership. So private land owned or communal land or state-owned properties. So for example, concession or natural reserve. And then the process is you prepare the project. Maybe some colleagues here would be able to describe this better than me, but prepare the project. And the important part is to certify it so that you can show that this is a project that really that will really reduce emissions. And then after that, you show that, okay, this project has really done that. We're monitoring it regularly, and each monitoring we show that this has been done. And so then a carbon credit is issued, and then you have a carbon transaction whereby a buyer will buy the issued carbon credits from the seller. In a jurisdictional program, it's a bit different. So this follows a political boundary. So a country, a province, a district, or a municipality, depending where you are, because every country has different names for it. And then within that program, you may have a project inside. So it could be what is called a nested program, a nested project that's inside a bigger program. So here the process is very different because it's following a more political process where the state is the one that's leading. So a lot of times it's led at the national level, and then it will involve provincial governments and provincial agencies or district government agencies. You start with a program that's making yourself ready. So you have, maybe you don't have the capacity to monitor forests, but now you ask for investment so that you're ready to monitor your forests, and then you implement the activities, and then after that you count how much emissions you reduce, and then there's a process where you then say that, okay, we've reduced as much, and there are programs that provide results-based payment, so payment based on the results that you've provided. So the trends that I've been seeing the past 5 years, looking at these projects and programs, is that at the RED project level, every 2 years we update our own internal, our own databases on RED projects, and there's always new projects coming in. So there's geographic expansion to different places, but also I might also add, a lot of projects also seem to just die down, right? We cannot determine whether they're active or not. There's also more questions about the quality of the impact of these projects, and people are also asking about the community's role as decision makers in that process. How about benefit sharing in that process, and whether the reductions are real or not. Also in the countries, they are also trying to figure out what is going on within their countries and make national systems to register RED projects. For jurisdictional programs, the jurisdictional programs came up because the idea that if you have different RED projects everywhere, maybe, you know what, they're just moving deforestation around. So they're not really adding anything, and then the deforestation is just leaking somewhere else. It's called leakage. So maybe government should be the one that's really leading this and taking a bigger picture look, and so it provides more political sustainability, financial viability. And here, jurisdictional programs are attracting new financing. There's programs that are really just focusing on financing, financial programs that are trying to fund programs at the jurisdictional level, whereas before a lot of funding will focus on the project level, but now it's more at the program level. And then there's also a lot of certification that's trying to cater for large-scale jurisdictional programs, whereas before the certification was more for project-level activities. And now there's also a lot of more attention on how to link between these different parts of the picture. So the RED projects, the programs, and then countries that are starting to do their carbon markets domestically. So how do I keep track of it as a researcher, and how do people keep track of all this stuff as a researcher? So in C4, we have developed a database that's open. It's called IDRECO, International Database of RED Projects, linking economic, carbon, and communities data. Okay, it's a long name, but what we're trying to do is information about RED projects are everywhere. It's not really centralized anywhere. So you find RED projects, let's say different standards, like Vera would have a list of projects that are certified into their different standards. You have Vivo, you have Gold Standards, and then you have jurisdictions who are completely documented in some other part of the web space. So what we're trying to do is pull them all together. It was established in 2014 and updated. We're trying to update it quite regularly. Last update was in 2022. And each program or project is categorized into more than 110 variables. So we're describing basic things like where they are, how much emission reductions they've estimated they will reduce, what kind of certification are there, how much carbon credits have been transacted in some in public registries, who are their partners, what are the community benefits that they have mentioned in their documents, the project documents. And this is all based on public data. So basically huge crawling of reading a lot of project documents. And so our objective to do this is to provide uniform, global, systematic, and sort of updated data about projects in a format that's useful for research, so like students like you. So we've seen as we go along, the number of projects can add up, but the number of active projects don't necessarily add up. I don't know. I'm doing a time check here. How many minutes do I have left, or maybe I should just stop there?
Yes, Kak, actually your time is already like over. But however, like if it will be like the last slides, it will be okay.
It won't be the last slide, so I'm just going to skip this. This is all about financing. So it's nothing to do with, well, not nothing, but it's not really related to what I just said, so I can just skip it and have some final thoughts here. So I had some slides that I wanted to share with you about financing. So I've analyzed data from the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, I would say, to find how much money countries are giving each other to support RED activities in another country, and then adding them up. And what I've seen is that in the last 2 years, 3 years, the financing for RED is increasing. And so the big picture that I see is that this financing, not only from countries to each other, but also from private financing of RED, is trying to compensate people for not deforesting and to fund the people and the institutions that are needed to monitor the forest, to protect them, and to develop and to implement these programs or projects. And this is also an effort to create a new commodity. But my question is, who's benefiting from this? Because it's unclear, looking at the documents, who will be benefiting, and comparing it to the field, you don't really see information from the field going up. So from the RED projects, it's very clear that the private actors, companies, and NGOs are leading the implementation. And so here, the benefit sharing and the decision-making roles are quite unclear for me. It's inconsistent from one project to another. And then also the local government role is also not consistent. At the jurisdictional level, it's clear that the role of the government is consistently very present. And they also have to provide benefit sharing plans and safeguards that are so to clarify that from the start, but the effectiveness is difficult to judge. But I feel like these two approaches are quite complementary because they involve different actors. And I think to fight climate change, we need to engage everyone. Thank you. And here's the QR code for the database if any one of you are interested to download it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanya. And just a quick question. We have one question in here. Like, is it possible to have to share the PowerPoint to the participants?
Yes.
Sure. So we will like pass that through email to all the participants. Thank you so much for the time, Kanya. So we would like to move to another speakers.
Okay.
So
I will stop sharing.
thank you, Kanya. And we would like to yes, Ademanji, please like write your questions, and we will try to uh, read it afterwards. We would like to go to Mrs. Rulita for the next presentation, and I will pass to Kak Afif for the technical side. Thank you.
Wait a minute, Waning. Hold on. Mhm.
So Kak Rulita, please, the microphone is now yours.
Okay, thank you, Wening, and thank you, Afif. And Assalamualaikum. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's good to see young faces here in this event, and I'm very happy to be invited to as Wening has been saying to me, collaborate to the celebrations of the International Day of Forest this year with the International Forest Student Associations. And I'm very pleased to also be able to share some of my thoughts here. Wening has already introduced my backgrounds a bit. Well, I've been working almost more than half of my life actually with the Indonesian Forestry Workers Union and its global affiliate, the Building and Woodworkers International. And since 1998, I've also been actively engaged in the topics of sustainable forest management and forest certifications, also in the campaigning on the Safe Forest, Safe Jobs, Safe People program amongst the trade union organizations. And I think why there has been some questions about why union organizations are paying quite a lot of attentions to the climate change issues or about the sustainability issues is that because we believe that if we are not promoting sustainable development, both in our workplaces and also in the society at large, then there is no guarantee of the sustainability of our employment in the long future. And so this also one of the reasons why that has driven me to be consistently promoting labor issues within the sustainable development framework and also in the sustainable forest management. Next, Afif. So yeah, employment in the forest sector. So I would like to just limit my talk for today on the labor-related issues because I think Ibu Nia has already explain more about the technicalities about the climate change and also about the RIDD and carbon projects globally. And I also believe that Pa Edwin will later on touch base on the financing issues being from the Indonesian Stock Exchange institution. So I'll just try to restrict myself to talk more about the labor issues and how it relates to the climate change and carbon neutrality projections. So this figure is sourced from the publications from the FAO in 2022, that currently there are 31 million workers employed in formal and informal sectors, and of which 8.1 millions are in the forestry and logging subsector. So we know how big the scale is for men and women workers, those who are dependent on the forestry industries and forestry sectors, and in the questions of the climate change, in the future of the forest sectors. And so there are about four a wide issues that has been pressing the sectors in the very recent decade. First one is on the climate change, and then we do also have a very huge demographic transitions. We have a very rapid technological developments and also innovations. All of those issues are somehow putting impacts on how the forestry industries are going to be operated now and also in the future. Next, please. And these are the emerging trends that we've seen nowadays in the forestry operations or in the forestry industries. We've seen a lot of shift towards the mechanizations of work, from manual harvesting to skidder or machine harvesting. The use of remote appliances. Some forestry companies have already started to use drones for fertilizing their plantations, or remote sensing. And then we also have, there's been a lot of initiatives in the topics of sustainable intensifications, in governance, and a lot of enterprises have also started restructuring its operations, and the informalizations of work. In certain countries, there's been social forestry topics has been quite of major trend, especially in Indonesia nowadays. And we've also been touching base about the carbon trading. We've had payments for environmental services as perhaps part of the carbon trading, and also on the RADD plus programs. Since the 2010, 2015, there's also been a development in the creations of green jobs ecosystem. There's been a change and shift in the skill set demands on the forest workers, and also the questions on the forest certification. So these are the emerging trends that are surrounding the forestry sectors nowadays. Next. So what are emerging forestry jobs and at what scale? So I think since the participants today are mostly from the students in the forestry, from the first forestry faculty or majoring forestry, and you've also been quite paying a lot of attentions on the forestry job. So I would like you to write in the chat what you think are the emerging forestry jobs. So just to also, it's good to know about which participants are paying attention and following this webinar. closely? I haven't seen one, so I'll just give like 1 minute for you to write on the chat. Geospatial data analyst, yes. Harvester. Okay. GIS. Emerging forestry jobs, good. Okay, there are still like 50 more participants. Researcher in the field of forest diseases, tree improvement, forensic, ESG something, great. Agroforestry, wood science, biotechnologist, forest sustainability. So I'm counting still less than 20. How about the other 30? Carbon trade, resource management, dendroclimatology, carbon accounting, pest management, anything to do with GIS, wood sciences, biodiversity consult, forest management and preservations, climate finance specialists, fire management, yes, very important for countries with lots of drought like the Indonesia, Australia just last year. Plantation managers, habitat sustainability modeling, conservations, pest management. So yeah, thank you. It's good to see that all of you are paying attention. So now I can continue. Well, you have already identified the emerging forestry jobs, those that have been existing perhaps in the past, but also there are a lot of jobs that are just emerging perhaps within the last decade or two. But there these are those jobs that you were mentioning are perhaps medium to high skilled kind of demanded jobs skill set that is required to perform and require certain skills to acquire to be able to perform the task in the occupations that you were mentioning. And there are still a lot of positions or a lot of work out there that are perhaps predominantly worked or predominantly done by workers with lower skills, to which just very recent, about 6 months ago, there's been also a conference on the green jobs, and the OECD representative just quotes that 51% of the work in the forestry is performed by lower skilled workers. And so this is perhaps a bit a reality that we still have to face, but also the realities that we also need to acknowledge how to make improvement for the future work in the forestry. So next, please. So I'm talking about green jobs, because if we talk about the forest jobs, then I think I would like to introduce the idea on the green jobs and decent work. All of you are perhaps familiar with the term green jobs. Everything, people would assume that everything that is involved in the activities in the plantations, in the forest loggings, or in the nurseries, or in the conservations or restoration sites are considered green jobs. Well, it is not, unfortunately, because the definitions of the green jobs as based from the ILO is that if you see in here on the slide, the left side, there are 3 circles. So the first circles, and the green one is the employment in productions of green products and services. So it's not necessarily only forestry related, but it can also be something not forestry, but it is in productions of green products and services. And the yellow one is that there's employment in the environmental friendly processes, and that in the red cluster, in the red circle, is decent jobs. So green jobs is defined those dashes, intersections between all of the 3 circles here. So perhaps if there is an activities or there is a job that is employed in the productions of green products and services, but it does not apply a decent working conditions or decent work, it is not defined as a green jobs, unfortunately. And so what we mean by decent jobs or decent work is that it needs to also address and fulfill the 4 requirements here, as what I've written on the right side. First of all is that it promotes social dialogue in the workplace. It covers, so the workers or the workforce are covered with social protections, and rights at work is exercised, and that there is also a stable environment, stable employment for exercising these activities. Next, Afif. So what are the required mechanisms to actually make these green jobs realized? So we had at least we identified that there are 6 mechanisms that needs to take place. So first of all is the policies, and we need resources to do that. We need inclusive engagements. We need decent job qualities, and we need market, of course, to pay for the goods sold or the services sold. And also we need to remove the barriers that would hinder this decent work, or especially or the decent or the green jobs to be materialized. So next, I think I still have some times to elaborate a little bit on each of the mechanisms that I just mentioned before. Policies, what are the policies? The policies here refer to the ILO guidelines for a just transition toward environmentally sustainable economies and societies for all. I happen to be one of the expert in the tripartite conference drafting these guidelines in 2015. So this tripartite conference produced a set of guidelines that would be serving as a reference for the countries, the industry players, and the industry stakeholders to adopt just transitions when they are shifting towards an environmentally sustainable economies or industries. So there are 9 policies that are available here, and I've also actually shared the links on these guidelines to one a couple of days ago for you to have a look at it. And perhaps if you're interested to learn a bit more about the policies, I've also quoted the link to the publications of this policy. So these policies are actually quite very I wouldn't say simple, but it's not like a high level kind of, if you're reading COP or the United Nations perhaps the documents, it's not like that. It's not that complicated. It's very simple. It's very in very straight and plain language for everyone to understand, but it also contains quite a lot of directions and advices on how actually these guidelines can be of a reference. Next, please. And after we have the policies, we need to have the resources. This is where all of this financing, investments is playing quite a huge role in. And the ILO guidelines also mentioned the financing and investment proposed approach through public funds, private investments, tax or local economic development incentives, public procurement, and so that it would also boost or try to encourage business resiliences, especially for micro and small medium enterprises. In the coverage of the resources, we also need to build the capacities. When we're talking about the communities or we're talking about smallholders, social forestry, it's very ideal for the community forests, for example, to play part and also to be developed. But one of the biggest challenge for the smallholders, especially, is the capacities. So how to build the capacities if there is no adequate or sufficient resources to do that? So this is also something that needs to be tackled. Capacity building, skills development, support measures, and applications of green technologies, and also job protections in the long run. And capacities for those who are delivering the activities, as well as the logistics and the knowledge to do that. And we can also use some best practices from other countries, perhaps, or other places, enterprises who have been applying the green jobs practices that we can learn from, and could be duplicated in other places as well. Next, please. And
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but you will have like 5 more minutes before we move to Mr. Edwin. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, I just need 5. Yeah. So this is an inclusive engagement. It refers to the social dialogue that I mentioned in the previous slides, which covers the policy designs, implementation, evaluations, and the participations of social partners, and that there is also a dialogue mechanism in place. If for the specific on the forestry operations, we got what the free prior informed consent definitions could also apply here, and the collective bargaining for the relations of between workers and the enterprises or the companies. Next. And we have then the decent job qualities. What we mean by decent job qualities is that there is productive employment in place, which applies also and enforce fundamental rights at work, promoting social dialogue and social protections, and also applying a sound and adequate occupational safety and health. Next. And then the next questions would be who buys? So there is a very huge demand on market creations, and hence also access for the micro and small medium enterprises and the cooperatives to also be benefiting from the carbon neutrality projections. There also needs to have a supply chain efficiencies and stimulating demand. What I mean by supply chain efficiencies is that there might be a very efficiencies in one production unit or factories, but it does not necessarily have the same efficiencies when it comes to logistics, when it comes to transporting the goods, when it comes to transferring the wood-based products or the goods from the forests to the factories to the mills to the retailers and to the consumers. So the supply chain efficiencies is also something that is still challenging to be tackled now. And next, and we also need to remove the barriers because I think it's more than 50-60% businesses are still applying business as usual. And there is an absence of national policies. The work culture in the enterprises or companies are still the old-fashioned. And also the free riders who are taking advantage of this whole scheme, but not necessarily contributing anything to the work. And how we, so one of the way on how we can remove these barriers is by, of course, next slide, with the help of a forest certification scheme. So yeah, I was posed the questions as the last point to also insert in my presentations. Can forest certification help in this overall discourse? Well, I quoted at least two statements. One is from the Nature Conservancies, and another one is from the Forest Stewardship Council, that when it comes to the climate change issues and the carbon neutrality issues, so reforestation, avoided deforestations, and improved forest management in combinations can sequester an additional 14 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent each year, which is more than twice what the US emits annually. So this is a statement from the Nature Conservancy. And the Forest Stewardship Council in its website says, claim that the forest that measure carbon storage using IFSA ecosystem services procedures realize a 17% average increase in carbon stocks over a management cycle by implementing forest management practices such as increased rotation length and preservations of dead wood. So this is actually, of course, there are a lot of other things and other nuances, other aspects that forest certifications could be of advantage to the carbon neutrality projections, as well as promoting decent work and decent job qualities, because I think there are quite a considerably higher bar for labor and working conditions to be met in the forest management scheme. And I think I'm also very happy here that Rocky Iskandar from the FSC Asia Pacific, who is also in charge for ecosystem services in the FSC, is also attending this event. So you can reach out to him perhaps later on if you would like to touch base specifically on the issues on ecosystem services of FSC. So I think that concludes my presentations for today. And thank you, Wening and Afif, for the opportunities. And I'm very happy that I could share some of these thoughts and some of these points. And back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolita. As regarding the time, we would like to pass to Mr. Edwin to present about the presentation. So for Mr. Edwin, please take your seat. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very glad that Ms. Rulita and Ms. Nia actually start the presentation before me, because they are way more experienced and capable to talk about the forestry. And I believe that most of the attendees here are from the forestry academics. So I'm just gonna add a little bit from what Ms. Nia and Ms. Rulita already presented to you, that we are now trying to add some, I think, some mechanism that is carbon trading, and what is carbon trading and how it's gonna influence this race to net zero that will, I think, is gonna be very crucial to our futures. So I think I'm just gonna start with this, I think the World Economic Forum has their survey last year, and then they asked for several top business leaders as well as the expert, and these are the top 10 of the most severe risks in the next 10 years. And you can see that out of 10 risks there, about half or five are marked with green color. It means that it belongs to the nature issue. So half of these 10 risks are actually related to the climate changes. So I think we have heard about the Paris Agreement in 2015. So Paris Agreement really, when all the countries realized that we are way emits more than we can absorb by the nature, and then I think the Paris Agreement tried to limit the increase of the temperature in the for the Earth is to the 2 degrees of Celsius, and then hopefully we can limit it to 1.5 degrees of Celsius above the pre-industrial level. But last year, I think we can see that the report mentioned that we are on track to fail to try to keep the temperature to be increasing. So what's next? Then we can introduce with the carbon pricing, the concept of carbon pricing. So what is carbon pricing? Well, we can imagine that if one of you or if yourself have like thousands of forests for yourself, right? And then you said that my forest can absorb or can remove about 100,000 of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which is good for the earth, right? But then you try to come to the government and said, hey, I help us with this climate changes. Do you have anything for me? Yeah, maybe the government can say that, oh, well done. Yeah, here's some money for you, and you can have like small of change for that. You came to the big, large companies, and then you said that, hey, I help us. What do you have for me? And then they're gonna be say, you know what? There's nothing for us in here, but well done for your job. So there's a problem here, yeah, right? In which anyone who can remove or at least reduce the carbon dioxide from atmosphere will not be get rewarded. On the contrary, any large companies or the nation who emits lots and lots of carbon or greenhouse gases then will not be punished. So carbon pricing is try to put a price on carbon. So with putting a price on carbon pricing will put or will give this incentive to the polluters, and then will give incentive to the parties who can remove or reduce greenhouse gases. That's why the principle is called polluter pays principle. And now, this is for Indonesia's case. Since the Paris Agreement in 2015, Indonesia has ratified Paris Agreement in the next years, and then we have set our NDC. What is NDC? It's nationally determined contribution, in which countries all around the world will commit to reduce the greenhouse gases by certain year. In Indonesia case, Indonesia tried to reduce 31.89 to 43.20% in 2030. And then Indonesia will try to reach net zero in 2060 or sooner. And then this is the interesting part is the sectors that have mandate today to reduce the emission. There are energy sectors, obviously, because energy is one of the biggest culprit of these greenhouse gases. And we have also the land uses. This is interesting, and I think this can be a pretty similar cases in countries like Indonesia, Brazil, or Congo or Tanzania, because these countries have a lot and large area of forestry in which sometimes it will be cut down for logging or cut down, let's say, for for a plantation, right? So now instead of reducing emission, we will now release it to the atmosphere. So that's why land uses is along with energy sectors are both has they have to be the leaders on this emission reduction. And there's also waste, manufacture, and agriculture as well. So then carbon trading is one of the tools available to achieve this nationally determined contribution. And one or two, there are two mechanisms here I highlighted in green is the emission trading or the allowance trading and the greenhouse gas emission offset or the credit trading. So what are these two creatures actually? Well, now we have two kind of carbon unit, or let's say a commodity or carbon security. So we call it carbon, and then there are two kind of carbon trading or carbon product. The first one here on the left is what we usually call emission trading system or ETS or compliance, sometimes compliance carbon market. So what is this compliance carbon market or ETS? So ETS basically is allowance. It's basically a quota, it's a permit. So government will address which one of the biggest companies that actually emit the largest emission out there, and then these companies then will cap by certain amount of quota, and every single year in the futures they will have less and less and less quota. So that's the idea of the emission trading system. So what happened in this emission trading system, for example, is company A here in this case, they actually emit less than what they are allowed to do. So in this case, they got a surplus. On the contrary, for the company B, instead of surplus, they got a deficit because they emit more than the government actually allowed them to produce. So what happened? What happened is then these they who have a surplus might sell to those who have a deficit. So we can see that the government will try to give incentive for companies to reduce the emission, and then will give this incentive to the companies who cannot reduce their emission. So what happened if, like, for example, the deficit companies cannot find a surplus companies? Well, it can be a subject of the carbon tax. That's why sometimes this combination called cap and trade and tax. Some countries only only apply or only run cap and trade mechanism. Some only run a carbon tax mechanism. And some country like Indonesia, we actually run a cap and trade and tax mechanism. So here's the first one. And the second one is the carbon offset or carbon crediting. So those who have a green project, for example, a forestry, they can ask a registry to issue a carbon credit as an offsetting mechanism. And then companies who maybe want to do good, right, they can offset their emission by buying these carbon credit. So now we have two kinds of carbon trading. One is more like on compliance side on the left side, and the other one on the right side is more on voluntary. So now I would like to focus a bit on the right side, which is a carbon offset or carbon crediting. So there are common practices of offsetting or offset emission. So to produce carbon offset and credit or carbon credit, the first one maybe we can talk about carbon removal first because it's the obvious one. So carbon removal, like literally absorb the emission, or sorry, absorb the greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. For example, with the forestry, right? Or for a technology such as carbon capture and storage. And then we have another kind of carbon offset or carbon credit. There is a carbon reduction. So in carbon reduction, we actually, sorry. So in carbon reduction, it's an attempt to give incentive to, let's say, for countries like Indonesia, we still use coal as source of our energy. So we have a lot of coal power plant, right? Well, in those, all of this coal power plant, there's one like, okay, you know what? I will try use a geothermal, or the other one try, you know what? I will try a solar sources, right? Which is a renewable. The other one maybe try a wind sources power plant. So now we have companies who actually will reduce the emission that will be released. So instead of coal, we get geothermal and everything. So the gap between this coal and geothermal will be the one that can be measured as a carbon credit. So for example, if usually coal gonna release about maybe, I don't know, like 10,000 or 20,000 of CO2 and geothermal like zero, then the gap will be the one that can be produced as credit. So then the carbon credit for 20,000 CO2 equivalent can be issued to the company who now run a geothermal or wind power plant. And in return, they can sell the carbon credit to the other companies who will buy it voluntarily. Why this is important? Because geothermal, solar, or wind, renewable energies are quite expensive. So this is for additional revenue for them, so that more and more energy can be cleaner. Well, maybe we can we can talk about different cases in, let's say, a more developed country in which they abandon coal maybe since long ago. Well, it's not the case with maybe Indonesia and some also other developing countries. So now a little bit about the how to produce a carbon offset or carbon credit in which later can be sold. And this is also interesting from the labor point of view, because there are few profession that is out there to help on this carbon trading or carbon credit issuance. So for example, the process can start with producing what the internationally acceptance is like a PDD, project design document, right? So, and when you create a project design document, you need to have an expertise on that, because now you have to really understand what's this project's gonna be and how much greenhouse gases they can absorb or remove or reduce, right? And later, the PDD need to be validated by a validator and verification body, or VVB. So this VVB is like an auditor. It's like a PwC or KPMG. They are the ones auditing this PDD, right? So again, there's another opportunity for, or another profession there, some kind of new profession that can be will growing in the futures. And right before, even before we start this process, there's gonna be some kind of pre-feasibility studies. There's gonna be a feasibility studies, because again, in those stages, expertise is needed. So when we try to talk about a high quality carbon credit, there are at least three factors among others that has to be considered first. And I think this actually already mentioned by Ms. Nia before, that there has to be additionality, permanence, and leakage. So additionality, the project should brings new added value compared to the condition without the project, right? So for example, if a forest, right, just leave as it is, right, is then somebody can claim the carbon credit? No, because they need to provide some kind of additional value there. Maybe they can hire some rangers to prevent illegal logging there, or maybe they can build some mechanism to help prevent a fire, which usually sometimes gonna be happening yearly, but since the project there hasn't not be a fire at all. So that's additionality that can be and needs to be on the green project for the carbon project. And permanence, they have to minimize risk of reversal by implementing a safeguard or mechanism. So for example, if let's say a carbon capture and storage project in which we can absorb greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and then drill it, put it under and store under the land, right? So there's a risk when, let's say, an earthquake happen, a crack will open and then
Excuse
greenhouse
me,
gases can be, yes,
Mr. Admin, just a
yeah,
reminder for that your presentation will end like in 1 minute. Thank
okay,
you.
sure, thank you. So there's a permanence then in which the carbon project needs to try to make it as permanent as possible, the removal of the greenhouse gases. And there's a leakage. So for example, right, if let's say a carbon project for forestry project, right, for 10,000 of acres of forest there, and then the project managed to prevent the illegal logging for these 10,000 of acres. But then these illegal loggers like try another area in which another area now suffer from this illegal logging. Then there's a leakage, right? So it's also another thing that has to be considered for the carbon project. Well, this is the last I think I can share to you that carbon prices across the world varied massively from $1 to $3 per ton to like $100 per ton. But in 2030, in which we gonna getting closer to 2050, I mean, then that the carbon price is gonna be going up and up and up, and it will be happen on the both product in which the ETS and then the carbon credit one. And this is an opportunity for every country because now countries with a lot of contribution now can have or receive a foreign investment or foreign money from the more developed country. So I guess I'm gonna end my presentation here. Back to you, Mbak Wadi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pak. So everyone, we will have like 10 minutes Q&A. So everyone that would like to ask directly, please feel free to ask directly. However, like we also currently have one questions from Rasuna. It is to Pak Edwin. So I think carbon market development, particularly the domestic market, depends on the green economy development within the country. So what is the status of green economy in Indonesia? What are the challenges and what ways forward to accelerate the establishment? So for Pak Edwin.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for the question. This is a very true that the carbon market development will depend on the green economy. And interesting part is actually more developed countries or the companies in the more developed countries actually they are more aware and more actively participating in this. That's why some companies in America, in USA, or in Europe, they are more actively buying carbon credit from developing countries. So that's why we can talk not only about the domestic green economy, but also the international part of the green economy, because more advanced green economy, I think they're gonna be more aware, and then carbon market can be growing even more. And I think that's true. And what is the status of green economy in Indonesia? Yes, since we ratified the Paris Agreement in 2016, a lot of regulation actually coming out regarding this green economy, right? We have this Financial Service Authority, which oversees all the finance institution in Indonesia, they already put out some regulation. They put out green taxonomy. They already issued then sustainable taxonomy. So these taxonomies and regulation actually can help. And why is this is important is once the banks already aware and practices green economy, you can we can guarantee it that the green economy is gonna be moving forward. So I think that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak. So there is another question. So it's a great question. So as your presentation is like so that carbon trading is more likely like top to bottom. It's like country to country. So is it possible for local individual private forest owner or group of small private forest owner to take part on the carbon trading? And do they have like a bargains yeah session to the country to the or to yeah to the government for this?
Yes, we actually tried. The Indonesian Ministry of Environment actually tried to build this carbon trading to can be also utilized by small communities or local communities or indigenous people who actually protect the forest since decades ago, right? So there's this story that some local communities got a transfer of or got a wire some money from the government, and they're surprised to accept such a huge sum of money. And then the government try, this is what you get from carbon trading. And they said that, wow, this is such a magic money, a magical money, right? So maybe they do not really grasp the concept of this carbon trading, but the benefit is there, right? So what can the, like say, small communities in the forest can do is they can try to build largest or larger community nearby, right? And then together they can make it a one huge carbon project in which now we can have a more economies of scale for the project, right? Because you can imagine if small and so many projects here and there, each of them needs to be, they have to pay for the verification, they need to pay for registration fee and everything, right? But now they can go in together maybe for some kind of a cooperation or some kind of things like that, and they can move forward. And this is our project, so you can registry, we can put it on the registry, and then they can sell the carbon credit. And this is a very open and very good opportunity, actually, at least for Indonesia carbon trading scheme. Right? So hopefully in the future we can see more and more of the local one or the smaller forestry project can be out there.
Thank you. So we have like two questions again. The first is for Kak Rulita. Is there any specific guidelines or something like an audit checklist to guide the forest audit process, providing for the specific condition prevailing within the different countries globally?
Yes. If I mean, I have already responded to some of the questions in the chat, but specifically from Owen. Owen, if you're from Uganda, right? And there are, so FSC is an international organizations and standard setting scheme, but it has national standards that are developed by the respective standard development groups. And I think for Uganda, there has been an endorsement of the Uganda national standard, FSC national standards for Uganda. I think when I was still at the board, it was in 2018, 17 or 18, something like that. But I think yes. And there is also one for Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, and some other countries as well, which you can, I have also written on the chat the link to the website of FSC, which you can perhaps look up. So, and the standards contain about the checklist for audits, of course. I mean, it's the standards, the indicators, and also the verifications mechanisms that needs to be fulfilled before a certain forest-based companies can get certified. So it's so the processes, the procedures, etc. It's all there.
Thank you, Karulita. And because we like have 2 minutes left, we will I will like try to make it like into one question. So, talking about the carbon pricing, who set the price, and is it like the country itself or like the international level? And then like is carbon taxing is enough for the companies to reduce their emission, because like they already pay, so does it mean like the emission is gone because they already pay that? And the last is how Asia country especially like address the carbon border adjustment mechanism and the clean competition act. It's for Pak Edwin. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So, right, about the carbon pricing and CBAM. So, the carbon pricing, who sets the price of carbon? If we're talking about the ETS or the allowance or the quota, well, usually the government can set the price. Let's say, for example, with doing an auction first, right? This is like a government bond auction. So in this mechanism, then the government, instead of giving a pre-allocation, let's say, for example, hey, company A, you have this 100 ton of CO2 quota available for this year. They're now gonna auction it. So you want to put out or you want to emit 100,000, you have to pay for it through the auction. So that's you can find it. So, but any other way, the market is always talk about the price. So it's related to the demand and supply. It's always back to that. So about the carbon tax itself, that's why carbon tax, carbon pricing, they need to be high, but not too high. So that is I think it's a research from US or UKPEC. I think UKPEC have this research that too high of carbon pricing means it's gonna cripple the economy, but too low or carbon price is gonna be it's not gonna be affect anything. But let me tell you something. Like I know some of you maybe already learned the, the bad side of capitalism or the evil of capitalism. Well, how you touch the capitalism is touch them through the profit and loss report to the financial statement, right? And how you touch them in the financial statement is through this kind of carbon pricing and tax. So once it hit their book, it hits their profitability, they will act on it. For example, the CBAM, that's one of you already asked that CBAM stands for Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, right? In which the EU will going to be put more tariff for the imported steel or cement, right? So there you go. I mean, now every companies that want to export it to European Union territory, they have to pay more for that. So what's happened if you have to pay more? Then the company needs to think again how they're gonna produce this emission. They're gonna think like how can they reduce because they don't want to pay more to export it, right? So again, this is how we try to touch the heart of it, of you know, capitalist companies.
Okay, thank you, Pak Edwin. So for now, like there is no more questions from all the participants. So we reached our end, like the end of our session. We would like to say thank you, but before we end our session, let's have another session of picture session. So everyone, please like turn on your camera before we end. And we would like to say thank you so much for Pak Edwin and Burulita, like for all the knowledge. It's very great to understand more about how the smallholders and how a lot of forester outside there is someone that is not like us, like studying a lot, but they are all forester. And the action one of the carbon, that's really good to know. And I
All
will
right.
pass to Kaafi.
Thank you. So I keep the speakers here since we should like taking a picture together with speaker. So I'm going to count you, ladies and gentlemen. Hold on. Just keep you silent in the chat box since I'd like to, affect the picture session. So, okay, everyone, please keep silent for a bit in the chat box. So we could postpone for saying thank you to the speaker afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, right? 1, 2, 3. Okay, next. All right. 1, 2, 3. Next. I think we have 5. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Next. Sorry. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, the last. 1, 2, 3. All right, perfect.
Okay, again, thank you very much for all the speakers and participants, and see you when we see you again. Thank you so much. For Pak Edwin and Bu Rilita, thank you so much
Bye-bye.
for the
Thanks so much.
See
Thanks
you.
so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a great day,
Thank
everyone.
you.
See
Yeah.
you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Lolita.
Thank you, Edwin.
Thanks for your
See you
study.
all.
Good
See you
luck.
again tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone.
Kita end ya, Mas Ra.